Hi, I'm Tinny from Mini Bowl Design, and I'm back out in the factory again, setting exactly where I was in the last video I made, the two-part one on the adjustable stove. Now, that created some questions that I want to real quickly answer. I don't want this to be another 14-minute video. Simmer rings. Okay, I got a love-hate thing going with simmer rings. And there's 2 or 3 questions here, and I'm going to try to answer all 3 of them. Wow. Okay, on conventional stoves that don't have a wick in them, I don't care for simmer rings because if you put the simmer ring on and it does drop the heat down so you can simmer, the stove is running cooler. If it wasn't running cooler, it wouldn't be putting out the low heat that you need for the simmer. And when you run them that low, they tend to go out. If it's a hot day, you know, then my experience is if they're running hot enough so they're burning okay and they're not going out, then they're too hot for a simmer. And if they get the flame down far enough for a simmer, then they eventually just go out or they're going to burn smutty. It's still not going to perform well. Now, if you've got a gallon pot and you're stewing watermelon or something, yeah, then you can simmer and everything. But on these little pots where you're trying to heat up a cup of water or 2 cups of water, and you need really low heat to simmer something, I haven't been able to get them to really perform that well. They keep going out on me or burning funky. Certainly not repeatable, depending on the weather conditions, the humidity, the type of fuel, how much wind you got, everything else. So I don't even sell any, and that's why. Okay, now you go to a wick stove, the landscape completely changes because a wick stove, it's not dependent on boiling alcohol anymore. You've gotten away from that. There's a lot about a wick stove that nobody knows about, things about wick stoves. Only I know. I know that's arrogant, but anybody that knows me knows I'm arrogant. So I didn't invent the wick stove. Well, I really did, but I can't take credit for it because there were some people that played with it before me. They didn't have any success to speak of, but they did. So, you know, it's like the Wright brothers who, anyway, here's the deal on wick stoves. When I first started making wick stoves, I made simmer rings, and I made some huge mistakes which generated some knowledge, and now I'll impart that knowledge on you. My simmer rings now are built totally different than they used to be. The problem with a simmer ring is if the simmer ring, when you put it in place on a felt stove, actually touches the felt, it won't work. Because what will happen is, it'll work at first, but as the simmer ring heats up, and believe me, simmer rings get hot. When it gets hot enough, if it's touching the felt, it'll excite the alcohol in the felt, and the felt will take right off, and it's not a simmer anymore, it's a burn. So a simmer ring has to be made, and if you put a simmer ring on your stove and your felt is off sideways and it's touching the simmer ring, it's not going to work right. You got to make sure your felt is standing up straight. When you put your simmer ring on, it doesn't touch the felt anywhere. And what that will do is restrict the airflow, and you'll get a nice simmer. Okay, and the old ones didn't do that. They touched, and game's over, man. So there you have it. Now, somebody asked if it was better to use a simmer ring or to use a short wick. Either one works fine. The thing with the simmer ring is it's just a convenience thing. If you don't want to stop, wait for the stove to cool down, pull out the long wick, put in short wick, relight it, wait for it to come back up to temperature, you can simply set the simmer ring on there if your wick isn't too high. If the wick is too high, the simmer ring still won't work. But if you've got your wick at, 3/8 and you've got one of my simmer rings, this is for like a bongo original or a dot or something like that, it'll work fine. It'll cut it way back, you get a good simmer. Just make sure it's not touching the wick. Now on the turbo tops, they have a donut wick in them. Now, if you were going to make those simmer, you'd have to reach down when it's cold, take the donut wick right off, and that would really slow down the heat output. But you probably still want to trim down the center wick if you're going to like bake, really short. The alternative to that is the turbo top simmer ring, which you can leave the donut wick right in place, put the simmer ring on, it's 600 thousandths high, and as long as it's not touching the wick, and it shouldn't be at all the way they're designed now, it shouldn't touch the wick unless you've got one corner of the donut wick flipped up in the air or something. It's all tucked down into the turbo top where it's supposed to. Turbo top simmer ring should give you a nice simmer for baking. And that's the name of that tune. And I know there's going to be people who say, well, I've got a fancy feast stove. I use a simmer ring all the time. It works just fine. Well, my reply to that is, what's the name of this planet you live on? Or the name of this little world you live in? Because if you've got a fancy feast stove with a simmer ring and it simmers just fine day in and day out, you're not living in reality, man, because that's impossible. I know. And some people say, well, when I want to simmer, I put a plate between my fancy feast stove and the bottom of the pot. And the fancy feast stove burns normally, full, just eating alcohol like it's going out of style, but the heat's not getting to the pot because you've got a plate there. That's like driving down the interstate with a V8 Mustang at 100 miles an hour in low gear or second gear, and the engine's turning like 10,000 RPMs and you're getting a half a mile to the gallon. It's just not efficient. Anybody that would do that shouldn't be allowed to touch alcohol stoves. That's just nasty. Nasty, nasty, nasty. We just don't do that in better families. Terrible. Get a decent stove, get a decent simmer ring, and do it right. Don't screw around with plates and all that stuff. And you're going to have to carry a gallon jug of alcohol strapped to your belt just to keep the thing going if you cook with it that way. And the whole idea here is efficiency and lightweight. You want to use as little alcohol as possible. So, that's that. And always remember, the wick stove, like a Bongo Pro, an original Bongo or a Dot, it's just a giant candle. Anywhere a candle will burn, the wick stove will burn. I don't care how cold it is or how wet it is. If the candle will burn, wick stove will burn. It's just a giant wick alcohol candle. I'm Tinny from Mini Bowl Design. Try to have a really great day. Try to have some fun today. Yeah, heck, you probably deserve it. Unless you've been using a fancy feast stove. Bye-bye.